We're ready.
Okay, the Kenmore City Council is now in session. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Here.
Councilmember Kugler,
Here.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Here.
Councilmember File,
Here.
Councilmember O'Kane,
Here.
Councilmember Marshall,
Present.
Mayor Baker.
Excused.
Thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda is the flag salute. If you'd all join me with that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next we have agenda approval. Unless I hear somebody wanting to change the agenda, I'm going to consider the agenda approved. Seeing no objection, we'll move on to the next thing we have, which is, am I missing something? Oh, heck, sorry, I brought up the wrong, I brought up the wrong week. Here we go, sorry. All right, next we got a presentation introducing the new chairperson of the Kenmore Business Alliance, Steve Holmes, and Steve will be introduced by the Bothell Kenmore Chamber of Commerce CEO, Brittany Caldwell. Ms. Caldwell.
Hello, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Brittany Caldwell with the Bothell Kenmore Chamber. Thank you for this opportunity to do a quick update on our Kenmore Business Alliance, also known as the KBA. Our Chamber of Commerce has 5 committees. The KBA is one of them, founded in 2013 to connect our businesses, provide networking opportunities, address anything that comes up in the business community, and to connect our businesses to our city. So each year we select a volunteer to chair our committees. And we are so grateful for the leadership of Carl Michelman, who has been the KBA chair for many, many years. And we are just thrilled and honored to introduce to you tonight our incoming chair starting January 1st of next year. And most of you probably already know Steve. So Steve Holmes is the owner of What's Up, Stand Up, Paddle and Surf. Steve and his wife Cecilia serve both the Bothell and the Kenmore communities, have been active members of our chamber for over a decade. And we're just thrilled that Steve has volunteered to step up in this leadership position. So with that, I'd like to introduce Steve Holmes.
Hey, good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, and Council, as well as staff. I can't tell you how excited I am to be here in front of you guys. And thank you for your time, because I know you have a busy agenda. So I will keep it short, and I won't tell you my life story or anything like that. I really appreciate everything that you guys done, your input with the Kenmore Business Alliance. This city is really behind businesses, and that's what keeps me going. And I really appreciate that. I know being on the city council, I want to thank you for being there. I know how much work it takes. Volunteering is tough, but we really appreciate everything that you are all doing. You are definitely making a difference. And that gets our businesses strong. I look forward to meeting with the members of the KBA, as well as the council, the new members that we're gonna get, the residents of Kenmore, and all of us working together to make it more successful than it already is. And I think this is gonna be really a good thing. I've been an entrepreneur for over 40 years. I understand business. I like thinking out of the box, if anybody can relate to that. That kind of makes things move. So that's about it. And thank you for having me, and you guys have a great evening. And hopefully I can meet with you individually or as a group as 22 comes on. Maybe we can go have coffee, and I'd like to hear your ideas too. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. We're excited to see your leadership, Steve.
Thank you very much.
All right, next up we have public comments. We want to welcome our community members to the council's meeting. In this forum, the council does not engage in dialogue with the public. The primary role of the council is to listen. All comments must be addressed to the mayor and the city council. Please use the raise hand feature if you wish to speak. The clerk will acknowledge your request and call your name when it is your turn. Your time will start when we confirm that we can hear you. Please state your name, city of residence for the record, and keep your comments to the allotted time. Your time cannot be granted to another, and your clock time will not be reset unless there are extenuating circumstances and the presiding officer has expressly allowed it. Screen sharing is not allowed. You can submit materials to the council or clerk in advance. Please do not comment about pending development projects on which the council will make future decisions, as those are quasi-judicial matters, and council members must limit their communications about such matters. This meeting is being recorded. Thank you for expressing your comments. Madam Clerk, who do we have lined up?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. At this point, we have quite a few guests, and we'd like to take them in this order. John Peoples, followed by John Adamich, followed by Elizabeth Mooney, Stacy V, Vicky Grayland, and David Morton. Mr. Peoples?
Yes, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Okay, well, thank you very much to the Kenmore City Council for allowing me to speak tonight. This is a new experience, zooming in through my cell phone. Very weird. And I'd like to start by acknowledging that we live on American land and that we're very grateful to men like Watson Squire and Tracy Owen, whose attention to the Kenmore community and benefits can be felt by everyone who lives here today. And I'd like to also say I enjoyed hearing the banter before the meeting began, and I appreciate your good cheer on this chilly evening. And I'd like to wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving, and I hope you get the opportunity to spend time with friends and family and give thanks to God for our many American blessings. And while you're still working on city business, I'd like to revisit some things I heard last week and read about this past week. I'd like to encourage the council not to raise property taxes at this time. People are still reeling from the effects of the pandemic, and we have to be honest. Much of the damage from the pandemic has been done by government making decisions. And while not everyone on the Kenmore City Council had much to do with the worst effects, you do represent an institution that did have a lot of negative impact on people's lives and threatened to do more with the mandates and such. So I'd also like to ask you to not remove the right-hand turn lane from northbound 73rd Avenue Northeast to 192nd Street. Instead, I'd like to encourage you to add left turn lanes to every direction. I think the traffic calming may actually have the opposite effect and make people nervous. I'd also like to reiterate what the Business Council folks said, that businesses and the people, they're good for society. They don't exist to serve the government, but you exist to serve them. I'd also like to propose a moment of silence for vaccine victims and also the victims of the Washika, Wisconsin Christmas parade tragedy from yesterday. And with that, once again, I wish you all a very happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Peoples.
You're welcome.
John Adamski?
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead.
Good. Thank you for the opportunity to address the council. My name is John Adamski. I live at 5906 Arrowhead Drive. My family and I have lived in Kenmore for a little over 50 years. I'd like to address the council about the climate action plan on the agenda tonight. First, I want to thank the council and the city for setting up the CAP pop-up and the virtual open house meetings. I attended both of them. And I've read all of the CAP material in the package for tonight's agenda. And I want to describe an observation that I saw comparing the document called Engagement Summary that describes the feedback from the pop-up and the online meeting and the council interviews, and with the Strategic Actions Memo, which describes the staff recommendations for action. I said that I wanted to describe an observation that I saw between the two documents, the engagement summary and the strategy action. I really want to talk about some significant differences that I saw in the content of those two documents. First, and one of the most significant climate issues that I see in Kenmore is the impact of heavy industry in the middle of town, the asphalt and concrete processing. Heavy trucks, big barges. I looked at the engagement document to see if there was any concern like mine, and I searched several words. I searched industry, pollution, polluters, and asphalt, and I found 17 matches, all in the context of the heavy industry issue and concern over that. And I looked at the strategic plan and I found a total of 1 match, and all in the and that was in the context of gentrification, totally unrelated. It seems clear that the engagement comments on industry were not heard. Don't we need to acknowledge that we have a climate issue with a major polluting industry downtown, even if we don't have an immediate solution? The second of these issues that I wanted to talk about is the impact of climate on streams and lakes, global warming effects on fish runs and growth of nuisance aquatic weeds and algae. I searched several words again in each of these two documents. Engagement I searched for river, fish, lake, water quality, fish, salmon, and warming water. And what I found was 30 matches in the engagement document, all related to issues related to warming and its negative effect on anadromous fish and accelerated weed growth and algae growth. In the strategy document, I found 3 matches, one related to water quality, and it was just aspirational to encourage water system renovation. Shouldn't we acknowledge that the lake and the Sammamish River are warming? And shouldn't we acknowledge that we really need to find a way to mitigate the inevitable effects of climate change?
Thank you very much, Mr. Adamski. Elizabeth Mooney.
Hi, Anastasia and council and public. My name's Elizabeth Mooney. Yeah, you can't see yourself. You can see me though, right, Anastasia? Oh, no. Oh,
We can hear you, but not see. There you are.
Oh, hi. Okay.
Oh.
Hi. Thank you. My name is Elizabeth Mooney. I live in Kenmore, and I am president of People for Environmentally Responsible Kenmore, a 501c3. We've been around since 2001. And I've been coming, and I want to just support right now what my friend John Adamski just said. Thank you, John Adamski. One of our friends is Joan Hardy, and I just want to emphasize the impact of heavy industry, global warming, salmon recovery. Right now, it's the end of the year almost, and I know that we have been working on the asphalt emissions and whether or not our citizens are breathing in emissions that are not healthy. We've had help from our state representative, Jerry Paulette, Javier Valdez, and Senator David Frocht. And thank you for writing the governor, who has let us down on hazardous air condition days. But what I would like to do is ask whether, now that we are working with Dr. Robin Evans Agnew, who went to COP26 in Glasgow, and now that we're talking with John Adamski and we have this engagement and strategic plan, can we please have some feedback with our PERC-supported Kenmore Clean Air Coalition on where we are with the Cascade consultants in their work on this egregious action at our shoreline with the impact of heavy industry that is not up to modern health standards. I know we're considering perhaps with the winter coming and weather inversions, that it may get worse, but would it be possible to have a meeting before the end of the year with our Kenmore Clean Air Coalition and find out where Cascadia is in working with the Puget Sound Clean Air Coalition, I'm sorry, Puget Sound Clean Air Agency. I lost about 20 seconds here, Anastasia. But what I'm wondering is whether we can consider testing the emissions from the Burt Gilman Trail and working into 2022 with the folks if it is justified. I don't want to waste our money, but we need to find out whether our air is clean and healthy to breathe. And PERC is certainly willing and happy to work and get the feedback and educate the community.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Mooney.
Bye. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you. Stacy V?
Hi, Stacy Valenzuela Kenmore. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Several residents and city council members pointed out how misleading the 2 climate action surveys were, yet the information seems to still be included in the presentation. It's extremely disappointing that after all residents reported concerns and ill effects of the asphalt emissions, they are not listed as a higher concern. The best that is recommended is to provide box fan with a filter to clean ambient air for our residents. With technical advances, the least that should be provided is air purifiers with HEPA air with filters that cleans air of 60 to 80% of pollutants. Many of our best solutions have been contributed by our residents. Week after week, month after month, the emissions from the asphalt plant and wood burning, fireplaces, stoves, and fire pits contribute the most contaminant to our air. I support David Morton, who has brought forward and educated many of us with the need of emission testing, eliminating use of petroleum oil binders, improving clean air processes with the double barrel mixing drum requests for cleaner processes and decreasing the asphalt emissions. We need emission testing. We need a health evaluation. Currently, there are 2 programs that I shared on Kenmore Neighbors with rebates to encourage replacing home burning fireplaces and stoves. All of these should be actively supported. We can't stop the wildfire smoke, but these are steps that we can do to improve air quality. We need the city to actively support lowering the greenhouse gases, stop from cementing any of our natural habitat areas, use other materials, save our tree canopy, and take steps towards improving our environment. We need the city to require testing and cleanup of all the soil and water on the Modka sites in Kenmore before and during construction. We have many residents and organizations that support our environment and live each day with taking steps to do so because they care. If the city shows that they care as well by supporting our climate change, others might be encouraged to follow. In regards to raising of taxes, it hurts more than just our seniors. It hurts a lot of people that are out of work, as well as the processing for senior exceptions are behind. So North Shore Senior Center is waiting before instructing any others. My application has been in for 2 years and I'm still waiting. I agree with Mr. Peoples in regards to the traffic slowing concepts actually cause more problems and likely road rage. I hope you will take these things into consideration tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Valenzuela. Vicki Grayland? Vicki Grayland? Vicki, can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
We can, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I'm Vicki Grayland. I live in Kenmore. I want to support the initiative program that people are talking about lately. On the anniversary of his death, I'd like to read this quotation from John F. Kennedy. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. Yeah, we thought it couldn't happen here, but January 6th was quite a lesson to us all, I think. So I'm in support of the initiative. I'd also like to talk about the Climate Action Plan. Why are you promoting the PSC green energy concept? That is paying extra to PSC for doing the right thing. I have this crazy idea, people should just do the right thing. Where's the cost? Where's the cost benefit analysis? How much is this going to cost us? If it's going to cost extra, it's not pointed out in the document. And I also would like to say that the greenhouse gases produced at the asphalt plant have never been included in our greenhouse gas assessment, even though over a year ago, Milton Curtis and the council did pass an ordinance that it would be included. And I support my fellow citizens in their comments, and I thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Ms. Grayland. Good night. David Morton.
Good evening, council members. I'm David Morton. I live near Redmond. Tank trucks regularly deliver binder to Cadman's asphalt plant in Kenmore. Public records show that WashDOT has not tested Cadman's binder for 4 years. The introduction to AP 42 says that clean air agencies like PSCAA should ensure that asphalt plants use the same raw material input as was used by the asphalt plants analyzed to produce the AP 42 emission factors. For PSCAA to predict emissions from asphalt plants or to make other emission assessments, PSCAA must ascertain that asphalt plants use performance grade or PG asphalt cement. PSCAA and DOT don't know what kind of binder is used by Cadman's asphalt plant. The asphalt process in AP 42 uses only solvent-free PG asphalt cement. Cadman says they use oil, which is industry jargon for a variety of asphalt binders, including cutback asphalt, which contains petroleum solvents. Solvents like kerosene in the binder greatly increase the quantity of air pollution emitted by asphalt plants. Only minor amounts of VOC are emitted when PG asphalt cement is used as binder, but cutback asphalt is a major source of VOC. The design of Cadman's batch mix plant and its use of medium curing cutback asphalt causes tons of volatile petroleum solvent vapors to be evaporated into the air breathed by thousands of people. Cadman does not use methods that prevent the emissions of solvent vapors. There is a solution which will benefit not only the people downwind from Cadman's plant, but will benefit Cadman and the city of Kenmore. Cadman's antiquated batch mix facility can be upgraded to a zero emissions asphalt facility. Probably the best upgrade option available is the double barrel drum mixer by Aztec Industries. This technology guarantees productivity and top quality mixes while keeping operating costs low and meeting the most stringent environmental codes. The double barrel mixer produces more tons per hour of hot mix asphalt than a batch mixer and burns less fuel. The double barrel is designed to reduce emissions and minimize oxidation in the mixing chamber. The result is a better mix and easier permitting. If the binder contains light oils which evaporate in the mixing chamber, these vapors are drawn into the burner flame and incinerated. Details are on Aztec's website. Aztec's double barrel drum mixer could eliminate Cadman's air pollution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morton. Deputy Mayor, I see no additional hands raised at this time.
It looks like we just had a hand pop up. Or maybe not.
Well, Mr. Michaelman, did you have your hands raised? Would you like to speak? Mr. Michaelman, did you wish to speak?
Yeah, I had my hand up all this time.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, Carl Michaelman, 18023 62nd Avenue, Kenmore. First of all, with Steve Holmes as KBA, wish him the best. It's been a good run, time for a change, changing of the guard, so he'll do well for us. I'm looking forward to that. The other thing that I want to talk about, it's getting a little concerning here. It's time for us to get back and open up City Hall. It's time for you, the council, instead of doing Zoom meetings and letting the people into this. The pandemic is the pandemic, but we have guards towards it. We have masks, we have King County saying you guys show your cards to go into a restaurant. It's time to see you folks face to face and not go ahead and just stay in these Zoom meetings. It just seems like it's becoming just, what do I want to say? I'm having a senior moment here, but there's no relationship here. It just seems like it's Zoom, Zoom, Zoom. And it's so routine to you guys. And I just think now is the time to change this. The other thing is I also want to talk about, which I talked to Councilwoman Shrebnick, that, with no one talking to us, which is fine, we're giving our opinions. But it would be nice if someone calls up a person such as all of us and say, we're hearing about you, we're working on it, or we get into a situation. But it seems like these public comments, you're not going to speak, you're not going to say this, you're not going to say anything. It's just becoming so cold and so routine. So, I think it's time that, we start getting back to regular meetings so we can all meet and see what everyone really looks like instead of just, having the backdrops. I've noticed that some councils right now, you guys are at City Hall. And so that's interesting. So I just think it's time for us to get back to regular meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michaelman. I don't see
Anybody?
any hands.
Does anybody else want to speak? All right, not seeing any more hands. We are going to move on to the consent agenda. The chair will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved, Councilmember File. Second, Councilmember Kugler.
All right, we've got a motion, a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. Consent agenda is adopted. And now we're into the business agenda. So the first item on the business agenda, Climate Action Plan Strategies and Action, presented by Environmental Services Manager Richard Sawyer.
Thank you. And, oh, there's Angela.
Yes, just joining right now. Thanks.
Hi, Angela.
Hi there.
We'll just pop up our presentation here.
Yeah, can you guys see that okay?
Yes.
Hi. Well, good evening. Thank you for having us back. So as you recall, well, actually, I'll just say we're here to, again, present the Climate Action Plan Strategies and Actions. We met with you about a month ago to kind of go line by line through all of the draft proposed strategies and actions that we have been working on as part of this plan, and received your feedback. And so the CAP team has taken that feedback, and we've been making some minor tweaks and adjustments, and we have provided you with a hopefully final list for approval tonight. And so we don't plan on kind of going line by line again, since we went through that exercise last month with you. So we hope you've had a chance to read through that final list. We also provided a track changes version, so you can see any tweaks or things that got moved around or reorganized. You can see all those changes up front. So if you have had a chance to go through that and let us know if you have any other changes, thoughts, comments, we'll have those available to pull up and we can zoom down to and answer any questions that you all may have. So I'm presuming there are going to be some questions, and then hopefully if we can reach agreement on these final strategies, we can approve those, or if we need to go back to the drawing table and make more revisions or changes from this meeting, we're happy to do that as well and come back again.
Okay, and I'm going to ask my council colleagues, if you do have questions, especially now when there's the screen is being shared, if you'd please click on the raise hand at the bottom, because then I will see you that you have questions, because I can't see everybody right now. So just if we could all use that for now, at least, that would be great. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no problem. I want to leave as much time as we can to hear from you all. So any questions, comments, we're happy to dive into it.
All right, Councilmember Shrubnik.
Sorry, how do you want the comments? Do you want them kind of section by section, or, I mean, I have quite a few.
Yeah, Richard, do you think we should just kind of do focus area at a time? Is that like a organized way of maybe facilitating this part?
Sure, yeah. If you've got, we can start at focus area 1 and work down if that works for Councilmember Shrubnik.
I think that works. So Councilmember Shrubnik, do you have a question?
Okay, I wasn't sure if you want. So I have one overarching question, comment, and then kind of section ones. And the overarching one is that I was struggling with well, actually it's two-pronged. One is that when I think of climate action, there's kind of, climate action is about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and that's done through the emission side and the carbon capture side. And resilience to the impact of climate change is an entirely separate thing. And you have a separate section for that in section 5, but it seemed like there were quite a few strategies sprinkled throughout sections 1 through 4 that were really about resilience. And that also made the scoring of impact confusing, because you had both of those bundled together and they're really quite separate concepts. So for example, in section 3, there's things about food security, which of course is super important, and it's a resilience issue, unless you're really talking about pasture lands, which we don't have, and grazing lands and livestock, which we don't have in Kenmore, or very, very little. So I guess I would love to see the resilience topics clearly separated from, and they can stay in the same categories, but then just separate the impact issues and just don't call the other one impact, because it's not about impact on climate change. It's about responding to it. And so those are just different concepts. So that's my overall one. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think one thing I'll just offer is, that climate change is a global issue, but it's felt locally. So even if Kenmore reduces emissions to 0 tomorrow, you are still going to face these unavoidable consequences of climate change. And so we try to treat them as part of a package, because ideally you would be doing you'd be putting your investments in strategies that offer both resilience and emissions reduction rather than one or the other. It's ideal if you can do both. And so we do try to integrate elements of resilience across all of the actions. We also hear from most communities that this is a high priority for them, often from folks who are experiencing these impacts on the ground. And so by disaggregating, we sometimes lose those synergies between mitigation and adaptation. And so we try to view them as a whole. I think I hear your point about impact. It sounds like that is, it's confusing to weight them on the same scale.
Yes, exactly.
Given that they have a different conceptual framework.
Exactly.
So
yeah, they're both super
impact.
important. Yeah, both super important. I wasn't meaning to imply that they weren't. Sorry. Yeah. It's the scaling of them as the same. And that relates to my comments on section 1. So section 1 is, all about energy use, right? Building energy use, which is the highest highest, and you show that earlier, the highest area for GHG emissions, right? So the things that relate to Section 1, if, I would think those are going to be higher impact than things potentially in other sections like 3 and 4. And yet we didn't really see much of that distinction. And I think that's because of the merging of the concepts. So yeah. And then the specifics on Section 1, I struggled with, I understand removing the incentivizing the lead buildings because maybe it's hard to incentivize them. But again, this is going to be your highest impact if you can get new development that is energy efficient. This is the area for the greatest impact. And so I struggled with how did it get rated as like 2, it's like, maybe the feasibility is low, but.
Yeah. So for those, it is a function. So it's a function of, what would the impact be if it had a huge uptake? So if everyone adopted it and complied with it, yes, that would have a huge impact. But given what we heard from your community, they don't want to do it and it increases costs. I think we heard from city staff that building LEED can increase costs by 20 to 30%, but that incentives would only cover about 5% of those costs. So that we felt that incentives weren't the best lever to use, not that you shouldn't do it at all, but that an incentives lever would likely be less effective than a mandate or going through building code, given that your community, it doesn't sound like voluntary efforts would be very successful in this realm. Other communities have chosen through their coding process to do, rather than calling it LEED, more of a sustainable criteria checklist that has more of a point system, and that offers the flexibility that I guess LEED doesn't, and the cost scaling is different. I think there's kind of a premium on that certification. So I didn't want it to seem like we think you shouldn't do it. Absolutely, you're totally right that new buildings is your best opportunity to have it from scratch, already be built to be compliant. So we do have some coding recommendations in there. Not that you couldn't incentivize it, but just to go in with eyes wide open that would likely be a much less effective strategy, given what your community is saying about their interest, and the amount of an incentive that would make it worth their while does not seem like it would be a feasible.
I get that. It's the distinction between impact and feasibility, and you've got those 2 columns, and I just would hope that maybe they could be disentangled from each other a little better on that one. So that was, and then the community, the city. My last comment on Section 1 is that the city is 1% of the emissions, right? The city municipal. So again, the impact of city actions is minuscule. But yet we have them as rated as 4. And so I didn't really understand that. So, and so the converse of that, the community impact would be greater. So I'd hope maybe we could build out some things around community impact, like, incentivizing home energy audits and insulating, insulation. That's the biggest way you lose energy in your home, is not having adequate insulation. So, incentivizing, paying for it, pointing people to programs that help pay for that. Programmable thermostats, low flow toilets and shower heads, heat pumps. These are all significant ways that homes can become more energy efficient. Permitting for solar, retrofitting. So maybe those are too specific, but our impact is going to be with the community way more than, I think we should do the municipal things, but the impact is low.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we do have, just because I think it's getting a little bit buried here, but we do have this action which speaks to incentivizing home changes at home. So exactly what you just described would all be examples that would fall under 112. So it sounds like what's missing here is when we get to the implementation planning stage is actually iterating all those things you just listed. So weatherization, home audits, like all of those, all the different ways that you can impact your energy at home. Heat pumps is a huge one. So it's what I'm hearing is that we need to do a better job in the implementation section where we get into the weeds of listing all those things out so it's super clear.
Cool, thank you. Sorry to take so much time.
And just to add, I think additionally, those actions 121 and 124 also touch on some of those other, the solar programs and the efficiency retrofits that you also talked about. So kind of the same thing, just getting into the weeds, we can make sure that we address those in the plan itself.
Cool.
But I think there is a placeholder for those items.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions or comments related to Focus Area 1? I'm just seeing if I see any hands. Okay, Councilmember File.
Thank you. In section 1, there's, and just because I have now kind of adjusted my screen, I'm just going to recall the area. It's about upgrading street lights. It has a mention in there of street lights. Or is it traffic lights? It's traffic lights, excuse me. Thank you. So, of energy efficiencies, we still have street light improvements that need to be upgraded to LEDs over, standard bulbs that are in place, as well as traffic lights. I don't want us to forget we have a category here that still needs to be worked upon. And so I'm wondering if it was just left out, or is it just assumed? And I always hate to assume because we really have to spell things out in government.
I think I might have misunderstood the question because we have streetlights and traffic signals here.
Okay, I didn't.
I think I might have missed.
Okay, thank you for pointing that out, and thank you for the correction.
All right, any other questions related to section 1? All right, any questions about or comments on Focus Area 2? Okay, okay, Councilmember Shrubnik.
Sorry, I will try to be briefer now that I've made most of my comments. On 2.02, and I think Richard already responded to this in email, we don't operate buses or ferries, so that wouldn't be in the municipal section. 2.1.1, let's see. I'm not a huge fan of jargon. I would, rather than what I think is jargony, and of course I worked on King County's, environmental justice issues too, but I think the term environmental justice is jargony, and I'd rather just spell it out in plain language. What are we talking about there? So, ensuring that land use planning doesn't disproportionately negatively impact communities of color, people with lower incomes. I mean, is that what we're talking about? Just sort of plain English. So, and, if that's what we're talking about, is that again, this goes back to the resilience versus the impact on climate change. And I think those are two different things. I think this is a resilience issue. So yeah, so that's the comment on 2.1.1. 2.1.2, I don't know if this is grammar or just I'm not understanding what you're trying to say there. The GMA is about accepting growth. So, we also want to have affordable housing, but maybe just take out the and put a comma in. I'm just not sure what we're trying to say there, like a comma instead of the and between act and prioritize. Alignment. These are different concepts, so I wasn't quite sure why everything was all together there.
Let me double check that one. I think that this language came from King County's Climate Action Toolkit.
Well,
so that might be why it's very, very specific with that. But let me double check because I don't recall offhand, but that may have been why it's worded a little bit funny. So let me do a check on that one.
Okay, and I would say, we want to get density along our transit corridors, but I mean I would like that to be mixed. Some very affordable, some higher income. Just we want options that in all of our locations in the city, not just on the transit corridor. Yeah, I wasn't clear, and I mean, I think, Richard, you replied an email on 213. What does resilience mean in the context of code? I think, again, just spell it out. If there's a way to do that. Yeah. And I think, I can't remember if you talked about that in the email. I think you did, right?
I think so. If Mike, I can't see you, but I think Mike might be on the call and can speak to it better than I can.
Oh,
but I can't see his
performance
face.
standards. Yeah. So this is to withstand. So this is to withstand future climate impacts. So this is another one of those resilience strategies versus an impact on. 2.2.1, I'm going to look to the got a couple more in section 2. I'm going to come back to 2.2.1 because I'd like a change in language on that. 2.2.3, I think, I don't think from the email that I received that we are talking about natural disasters. I think we're talking about climate impacts, unless we're talking about earthquakes. I mean, that, I think we're talking about climate impacts like flooding, right? And if we are, I think of the term natural disasters as something pretty different. But, I don't know, does anybody else speak to that? I don't know. Melanie?
I'm just going to say that I actually see this plan as kind of broad. And the sentences in these categories, I appreciate your insight to driving for more clarity in these points, but I see these as charting a path in very high level linguistically. So I'm kind of uncomfortable with some of the edits that you're requesting.
Okay.
I think, and I'm just going to share, and I know that council is aware of my perspective, which is I really consider the resilience piece the most important piece of our climate action plan. So I'm comfortable with the weighting and the presentation. It's something that I very specifically have been driving towards. And as one of our public commenters talked about water and resources, I'm sure we're all aware how passionate this council is about salmon habitat recovery in our waterways. I want to, if Mr. Adamski is still online, I'm just speaking briefly to that. It's a very high level thing that we're going to be working regionally to work with, but it's captured without as much detail as we can right now because I think it's so big, but we are working on it. But I just wanted to share my perspective is I'm very high level here. So I appreciate the details that you're looking for, but I tend to be like, let's point the arrow and let's start moving there. Thank you.
See a lot of other hands up. Councilmember Kugler.
Thank you. This is actually just a request for section number 1 because we've gotten some questions about the PSC green energy program. I wonder if I just want to clarify maybe some background information as to why we would sign up for that. I don't know if that could be a footnote to a link or more information about that.
Yeah, we can definitely provide more information. I think we don't view this as a forever strategy. It's more of like what we call like a bridging strategy, which just means that the grid is getting cleaner and that's been mandated by the state and it's happening on a pretty aggressive timeline by 2025, no coal, by 2030, GHG neutral, by I think 2035 or 2040, it's completely all renewable. So while that's in motion, this would be kind of a way to opt in to green energy as individuals, as businesses, as the city, certainly not meant to be longer term. And I think one of the public commenters mentioned that there is a premium associated with it. And I think it's pretty transparent on their website. I can't remember offhand, but I think per kilowatt hour, there's a small premium. So it is more expensive. So we can absolutely add that context in there or offer it for consideration for the group tonight if that doesn't feel like a strategy that you all want to keep in here. But that, yeah, that's kind of the context with encouraging people to enroll in that. And it can be viewed as an investment in green energy, given the limitations of the grid at its present state.
Okay, Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you. I lost track of the specific subsection, but it was the one with aligning Growth Management Act goals with the denser housing around transit. And I totally appreciate Councilmember Srebnick's attention to all these in a fine detail, but I have to respectfully disagree here. I support the existing language, and I think it probably has a lot to do with my viewing the Growth Management Act as being not about acceptance of growth, but about management of growth and balancing comprehensive planning, just that it's all a balance. So I appreciate you hearing me out on that. Thank you.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. So I echo what my colleagues are also saying, is I really like to keep with the language. And that's important because our language defines how we grow as a society. However, I would like in future documents and in documents that are prepared for our community as well to have an inclusion of a definition, a reference list for terms that can change over time. And that is usually a best standard norm. I think it's an important add in here. But when I'm looking at sections 2.0 through 2.2, and I'm looking at our future possibilities of an electric ferry, transportation, enhancement, and our growth around that, we're noticing that we have yet to design around this element. I think it's important that we maybe enhance the build strategy somehow here. I'm not quite sure on just the right kind of wording I want to add to this, but I don't want to lose anything in the details because we're working towards growth here and providing a clean energy travel on our workways, on our walkway, around our walkway kind of waterfront. That being said, on section 2.2, when we're looking at the multimodal transportation options, to ensure that we have these options equipped to handle national disasters, this is something I think is essential to our growth in Kenmore, given that we have many streets that have one entrance pathway, and we do happen to live in the most seismic area in the state. Yet we still need to plan towards that. And so I think that as we are including this in the design less, drive less area, I think it needs to be in design somehow. I don't see it. I don't understand how it's incorporated in the drive less category of 2.2 versus strategic design and development, which I think kind of folds into 2.1. Can you help me with that? Help me understand.
That's a very good catch. I think that's a good catch, and it doesn't fit well under drive less. So I think we probably should move it up to build strategically, or we could even consider a new category, but I agree that it doesn't really feel right in that one.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more comments on section 2. I had one comment on focus area 2, and it was just with an area that Councilmember Srebnick brought up briefly, but the under 212, it says alter zoning and planning policies to align with the Growth Management Act. That language in and of itself implies that we're not aligning our planning policies to align with the Growth Management Act. I believe our planning policies are in alignment with the Growth Management Act. So I would be comfortable just taking out that first part because it feels unnecessary and could set up the picture that we're not already following the GMA, which I don't think is a image that we want to be necessarily putting out there. So I'd be more comfortable if we took out the first part of that sentence just to clarify what goals we're actually trying to get from that. Councilmember Shrebnick.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, and I just had one last comment on the section about things missing, and this, came from our citizens as well. It seems like this would maybe be the section, maybe it's somewhere else, about the reduction in heavy industry emissions. We have an unknown amount of emissions from our industrial sites. I'm guessing it's non-trivial, so I think it should at least be recognized. And then under the municipal efforts, and again, maybe these are the specific strategies that'll get to the implementation plan, I don't know. Things like commute trip reduction, ORCA cards, and then for our community, things like walking school bus, in motion social media, rideshare, guided walks. I mean, there's a whole host of specific strategies that could happen under that. Yeah.
All right, I think we should move on to focus section 3, focus area 3. Do we have any questions, comments about focus area 3? I'm not seeing any hands up. Councilmember Shrebnick. You're muted.
Just one. It's the same. All of the resilience strategies are super important. I just want them labeled as what they are. They're not impacting on climate action. They're helping our community cope with climate action. Those are two different things. They're both super, super important. So I'm just hoping we can indicate that.
Any other comments, questions on focus area 3? Okay, focus area 4, natural systems and water resources. Questions, comments? Councilmember Shrebnick.
Yeah. Sorry, I do have a few comments. I will be brief. So 421 and 422, I was a little uncomfortable with merging those. 421 is really about requirements on developers. So that felt pretty different, and I'd just be curious your thoughts on that. And similar with the other sections, 423, 424, those are more about resilience, which again, super important, don't want to neglect it. So yeah. So those are my comments on section 4, although I feel like, oh, I missed something. The last comment on that is, again, Councilmember O'Kane brought this up, and so did our commenters. We really underplay and under describe, I think, the impacts of climate change on our salmon or other native species, our water systems in terms of algae. They're kind of mentioned briefly, but I mean these are huge, and we're going to have to really work on resilience strategies to help these systems survive. So I'm hoping we can call those out a bit more clearly. But I would be interested in your thoughts on 421 and 422.
Yeah, and I might ask Mike to help me with this one. But our original thinking, we had some conversations with city staff about this one, but our intention with 422, and it sounds like maybe we have not achieved it, it would benefit from some additional tweaking, is making 4.22 stronger to be an umbrella overarching strategy that would kind of propose a path forward for the city as a whole, which would include developers, but it would also include what the city is doing with its land and how it's managing it. I think that's getting a little lost right now. But I guess our intention wasn't to exclude developers from it. It was meant to be a stronger action that would actually umbrella or encompass more of it. Richard, I don't know if you wanted to add anything, or Mike. I can't see anyone's faces, so if you're trying to chime in, please just talk over me. But
well, that was one of the intentions, and maybe that could use some clarification. But by moving it here, we were taking it not just to developers, but we were putting everyone under that umbrella. So city projects and private development. We thought that the direction was that you wanted both the city to lead by example and also, get the same result from the development community as well.
Got it. So maybe just call that out. That would solve that problem. Perfect. Thanks.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. And kind of looking at this section on 4.1, I'm looking at an absence of street and stormwater, roadway contamination and runoff. In regards to that inclusion of everyone, it seems like we aren't really addressing the heavy industry corridor area. One of the most filthy roadways near this high industry corridor, which the materials used, processed, and that come through on these trucks and fall off of these trucks land on our roadway. The roadway has to be cleaned and cleared, or when the water comes from rain or rinsing of vehicles, we are having contaminants that reach right into our storm water drains and off to Lake Washington, so close to the water. So I'm concerned about a lack of focus on street stormwater, roadway contamination in relation to heavy industry. And the second issue is I'm really concerned about not seeing, that investment in salmon passable culverts if we're going to continue this work.
I think for that one, we do have a culvert one, but maybe it feels incomplete. We have this one that we added based on the last meeting feedback around removing older degrading culverts and engaging the public in restoring those populations. But perhaps this is one to be strengthened, or maybe you could say a little bit more about that one.
Sure. Not only do we have old culverts, but we have areas that need culverts to make and improve that connectivity to, Lake Washington and our streams, so that we can have a restored, returning salmon population spawning in our communities. That's important. We are the last gateway to Lake Washington. So we have to think about not just retaining what we have, improving what we have that's expiring, old, needs to replace, but where we need to grow into.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, and if I can just add a little bit of clarification too. So for instance, in regards to the culvert replacements, that definitely has a climate impact and resilience component, because there are going to definitely be impacts to changing, climate patterns with the stream flow and rain that we're kind of also touching on here, that needs to be a component when we're planning and designing these culverts. But kind of the more general stormwater and water quality we're talking about before, particularly with, for instance, spills and water quality issues like that. We do have other plans in place, our stormwater management plans, our NPDES permit that are always, growing and becoming more stringent and tackling those issues. So I don't know if you had more of a, if you did, I guess I was just wondering what was the climate or the actual greenhouse gas component that was tying that in? Are you saying that you wanted something, is there something we're missing here, or is it, where we're trying to manage those and those other plans? Is there a connection that you're seeing or would want to see, or?
Yeah, sure. When we're looking at heavy industry business, if we look at it more broadly, we see business, right? But do I see a tie between addressing street and stormwater runoff and contamination by specifically looking at business and the heavy industry? I don't see that listed here in a very outwardly way. I mean, you'd have to go searching for it in other documents. So I think that transparency is important to not just our government, yet our community at large. And then when I'm talking about salmon culverts, not just replacing old, but we have to yet grow into, installing new culverts in new locations we haven't even had the opportunity to fund because we hadn't had the funds available in the past.
Oh, if I could, thank you, Councilmember File. Just to make sure, and maybe proposing 2 potential changes in reaction to your comments. I think one, in terms of the stormwater runoff, we have a few strategies, both municipal and community-wide, addressing green stormwater infrastructure, which addresses this stormwater issue. I see, at least thinking of in strategy 4.1, maybe in 4.1.2 or 4.1.3, I know we called out key roads, sidewalks, bike trails, and other potential considerations, but maybe adding considerations for more industrialized areas as well as a potential edit. Great. And then I think the other thing that I'm hearing, so 4.2.3, which addresses culverts and kind of like what Richard was saying, in stream flow, we know is an impact that we've already faced in this region for salmon populations and salmon recovery. But maybe we can just modify this to be a little bit broader than remove old or degrading culverts, to kind of include kind of like a assessment / prioritization of what needs to be removed or added regarding culvert design and siting.
I guess you're talking the difference between updating and adding new, right?
And also removing. So trying to be inclusive of all of those.
Yeah. As long as we are, I'm happy with that. I think that difference would make it more clear that we're not talking about just removing what has been, but room for funding to, install new salmon passable culverts in locations that had never yet been addressed. So thank you.
Councilmember Shrevenick.
Yeah, thank you. I think the issue is with our natural systems and our native species is broader than just culverts. I mean, the water is getting warmer. That's not culverts. That's climate change. And we need to protect fish and other species, from that impact. That's a resilience thing. So, and the algae is, again, related to climate change. So I think it's not just about culverts, it's about natural systems that are being impacted. And I guess I'd like to see us take a broader swing at that somehow in language.
I have a response, but I see Councilmember O'Kane has had their hand up for a bit too. It seems like you want to build on this too.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand.
Thank you. And I couldn't find my raise hand feature for some reason. Apologies. But I want to thank Council Members Shrevenick and File for calling attention to wanting more detail for the water portion, especially calling attention to salmon habitat recovery and algae and other invasive species. Because there's a big piece too of this is, and I consider this a resilience strategy and climate action strategy, invasive species removal with that. But I'm happy to see the stormwater and other functions included. I like the moves towards a broader approach on the culverts and others. There's almost like a language that I'd be comfortable with, but doesn't necessarily have to go in there. But I am glad we're talking about adding more salmon recovery language. I almost think on 4.2, oh, wait, no, that's the wrong number. Just a second. I'm looking at two screens here. 4.2.4, I could almost see putting with a salmon habitat recovery mindset or something in there, because as that, it's an umbrella when we do that, because it feeds into so many systems. So it's not just salmon, it's the systems that salmon are a part of and provide health to. And with this, riparian zone plantings and those sorts of things do ultimately help with sequestration and cooling. And I think I might have seen a little bit towards the cooling of and sequestration with planting. So I saw the planting thing incorporated. But anyway, I just wanted to thank our council members for just taking the lead to make sure that that salmon language and water language was more clear. And Councilmember Shrebnick, thank you for bringing up the algae and other invasive species removal, which are critical things to clean water and healthy water throughout our watershed. So, and yes, the industrial zone had the stormwater runoff and the mess that is Lake Point and our industrial area. It needs attention, and I'm not sure how we fit it in here, but it's critical. And I know it's private property and there's stuff going on there, but it is critical that land get developed in a way that is positive for our waterways. And I think that is the intention, but having that clear here is important.
Thank you. Just a response and maybe potential, I think, calling in some of the multiple kind of resilience benefits. I think some of the things 422, 423, and 424, I think all address, I think, this issue of water temperature that you brought up. And so just acknowledging that, a lot of water temperature, especially stream temperature, is often correlated with ambient temperature. And so the ways to mitigate that is habitat restoration, so providing more shaded areas via habitat restoration, but also making sure that there's sufficient water for in-stream flow, because with less water in the stream, it's easier to heat up too. So those are been two of the primary strategies that kind of address a lot of downstream temperature impacts that we see, including things related to algal blooms within lakes as well. So, but I think, so those are, I think, considered implicitly, but I think those can be brought out more explicitly in here as well.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any more questions, comments about focus area 4? All right, let's move on to any comments or questions people have about focus area 5, community resilience and well-being. I am not. Okay, Councilmember Kugler.
I think this section might be the right section to include something about encouraging businesses or maybe it should be like discouraging businesses or industry that emits, that like creates nuisance odors or emits, or like, I don't know how to word it exactly, but something to address the types of industry that we have in our city. And we want to discourage things that are like potentially polluting, giving off emissions or something like that. I'm hoping staff might be able to suggest some sort of language there related to that.
I'll jump in. I'm not staff, but I'm helping support Richard and Sam in this. I think because we have 513 here about studying, evaluating air quality and extreme heat interactions near industrial sites, acknowledging that with specifically air pollution, smog, ground level ozone, there is an interaction, especially with warmer temperatures and extreme heat events like we saw this past summer. So I think working with them, we can potentially add language. Not only do we want to study and evaluate, but potentially associate this with some additional policy lever as well. I would, I guess, also open to other suggestions from the council as well.
And yes, sorry, thank you. I was couldn't find I was trying to scroll down and find that. And there's also, you know, we can, yes, as Mike's saying, look at that further, but also, and maybe Angela, you can join also, but distinguishing between the air quality issues and then the greenhouse gas emission issues is also, you know, there's a distinction. So this plan is to try and eventually reach the goals that we're setting for ourselves, reducing greenhouse gas emissions and our carbon footprint. So just understanding the difference between those emissions versus things that may be impacting air quality is kind of, I know that conversation has come up several times as we're evaluating these strategies and actions.
Yeah, I think we've chatted about this before, but there's definitely a distinction between greenhouse gases and other pollutants. That doesn't preclude us from addressing other pollutants in the cap. I think it's just a matter of how we want to go about doing that and how to best utilize the city's resources versus the resources of other agencies that may have more direct influence, control, or regulatory authority over some of these issues. So for example, the Clean Air Agency or groups that have a directive to work on these issues. So it's just deciding what role the city wants to play, whether that is partnering with industry or whether that's partnering with the Clean Air Agency or who you'd like to work with to kind of affect change here. I don't know if working directly with industry in the past has been successful or yeah, we're totally open to modifying this language or adding something else into the cap. I think we would just look to council to kind of provide that direction of what the city of Kenmore's role is within the framework of the larger regulatory body.
Councilmember O'Kane?
I liked what Mike suggested about adding something towards action. I think that's a really, you know, with study and evaluate air quality and extreme heat interactions near industrial sites with the intent towards action or corrective action as necessary, whatever that means, if that means working with other agencies, but include something towards action because we need that. And with that, we are saying this is a critical area. We recognize it, we see it, it's incorporated into our climate action plan as not just a study, because the study can only go so far. It demands that we have to reach out. Action could be reaching out to those agencies for support. But our experience has been limited in the support of what the state agencies have even been able to do up to this point. Therefore, we need to be looking for what actions can we do as a city in working with property owners or whatever it is to make improvements. So I really appreciate the suggestion and thank you.
Any more questions, concerns about Focus Area 5? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands up. Is there anything else the staff needs us to go over? Mr. Sawyer?
No, thank you. I think we've obviously received more feedback than we want to try and adopt something tonight. So what we can do is I'll work with our team to, we'll go through the recorded meeting and make sure we're capturing everyone's comments in the right places, and we can do another draft for your review in another round.
Okay, Councilmember Kugler.
Thank you. I just wanted to provide some clarification that my suggestion might prompt some additional thinking, like in particular, like encouraging certain industry or discouraging certain industry might mean at a high level that we might revisit zoning, you know, maybe revisit whether we want light manufacturing or not in certain areas. It also supports that high level goal of encouraging green jobs, green industry. So that was kind of what was driving my suggested language. I just wanted to clarify that because the action piece of evaluating air quality, that's that is getting more specific and didn't quite capture exactly what I was suggesting. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, Councilmember File and then Councilmember O'Kane.
Thank you. So I want to quickly just address something I didn't see in this entire document, and I didn't happen to really think about last time. Yet, given the impact of climate change, global warming, and flooding, along with development, we have a change in pest management issues. These are part of our environmental issues, environmental at large, which is a environmentally at large, which is a public health issue and a social determinants of public health. So where does that fit in all of this document? There's a difference in the way we must engage the issue, given the increased issue and what that entails for the city. So what pathways are available, we haven't yet explored, and we certainly haven't yet raised the issue or discussed prior.
Sorry, could you just clarify for pest management, are you thinking what we talked about earlier around like invasive species, or did you have something else?
Well, invasive species, we think as plants, right? Herb based. But when I'm thinking about pest management, I'm thinking about rodents. I'm thinking about the issues we deal with that impact our environment and our communities. And the increased population is an impactor of the changes in global warming, climate change, and flooding and development. So we have this, other issue. Pest management is important when we're talking about rodents because of, public health, safety, and welfare, and the impact on environment. But there has to be some way of addressing this issue. And I think it has to be part of all of this. It's just a missing part within our plan.
Yeah, we can do a little bit of digging in that. I don't know, Mike, if you've seen that in other plans. I don't think I've seen pest management specifically in other plans that we've worked on, but maybe you have something to add there.
Yeah, I think oftentimes when we've included pest management, it's been in the context of invasive species, which does include non-native plant species as well as non-native insects. We haven't really included pest management on the scale of other types of residential pests in the past, but I think we can do some research about how we can integrate that.
Great. I believe Snohomish County has done a little bit of this, as well as North Shore School District, Olympia maybe. Not so sure about Olympia, but I think it's important that we go to evaluating this because it's an impactor and an impactor on in the status of social determinants of public health. So overall, we spend money towards it, more money recently, budgeting from a city side, and our community is noticing these differences. But unless addressed, we can't make a change there. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember O'Kane.
I just want to thank you for including the Councilmember Kugler actually brought this up, and I just want to say thank you for on 5.2.2 including develop a green jobs strategy, and I think it's probably it goes without saying, but part of that would be with the waterways work as well. So. But I was really thankful to see that in here and so clearly identified in our plan, because it is critical that we move in that direction. So thank you.
Any other questions, comments? All right, I'm not seeing any. So does staff feel like they have what they need to synthesize feedback today and bring this back either in a consent agenda or a future agenda at some point?
Yes, we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, next on the agenda, we have a public hearing on the mid-biennial budget amendments 2021-2022, presented by Finance and Administrative Director Leticia Salcido.
Hello, good evening, Honorable Deputy Mayor and Council members. Let me share my screen. I have a presentation. Let's see. Can you see it?
Yeah, we can see that.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so tonight we have a presentation for the mid-biennium budget amendments. Last week at the council meeting of November 15, we had a presentation that was for review and discussion. Tonight we have a public hearing, and if all goes well, it will be followed by an ordinance for your review and approval. For the revised Code of Washington, 35A, the cities that budget on a biannual basis and need to perform a mid-biennial review. They need to conduct a public hearing and adopt an ordinance approving any modifications to the budget. In developing the amendments for the budget, we take into consideration better than expected revenues, higher than expected expenditures, budget corrections, CIP adjustments, new programs, and then any adjustments needed so that we do not exceed expenditures in any of the funds. So we have allocations and we want to make sure that we have enough to finish the year. The next portion of the presentation will be the general fund as reviewed previously. With regards to revenues for the general fund, most of the revenues are stable. There are some revenues that are exceeding budget expectations. With regards to expenditures, the departments are spending within budget. With 83% of the year elapsed, as of October, we have spent 69 of the allocation for the year. Now, with regards to adjustments within the general fund, we have an adjustment of $672,000 to increase the sales tax projections to reflect better than expected actual revenues coming in, year-to-date revenues. With regards to, we also have within the general fund and revenues an $800,000 adjustment, but that's just to reflect a loan repayment from one fund to the general fund. The original budget had an allocation of $1.5 million and the actual loan was 2.3. So now it's being paid back. We need to reflect that in the general fund. With regards to expenditures, we have a $1 million transfer to Strategic Opportunities Fund with a goal to replenish it up to the amount. The goal is 2.5 million. So we're trying to bring it up to that amount again. The net increase, all the revenues, adjustments and expenditure adjustments, the net increase is $472,000 to the general fund. With regards to revenue adjustments for other funds, these are revenues not for general fund operations. These are restricted for specific projects or activities. For example, the first one here, we have an adjustment of $6.4 million. So we're increasing our revenues. And this is for the ARPA Fiscal Recovery Fund. That's the American Rescue Plan. We're receiving half of those funds in 21 and half of those funds in 22. We have an adjustment of $2 million for the real estate excise tax, and that's for capital or park projects. We're increasing that. Our budget reflects $1 million for 21, and year to date, well, actually, as of September, it was 1.8. The actual revenues were $1.8 million. Again, better than expected. For Transportation Benefit District, increasing that by $700,000. That's a vehicle license fees, and $700,000 half in 21, half in 22, the increase. Impact fees, again, better than expected revenues. Impact fees used for capital projects, parks, transportation, we're increasing that by $421,000 to reflect better than expected earnings. Grants, $5.4 million. That's for parks and capital fund, and then for the Sammamish Bridge Replacement Fund. And these are revenues that were budgeted in 20, but were received in 2021 for those two for construction projects. For surface water, we're increasing the revenue projections by $596,000 to reflect, again, better than expected revenues within that fund. We're increasing, adjusting by $6.5 million transfers in, and these are loan repayments, corrections from one fund to the other fund, just to make modifications and correct. Then the final one, $3.5 million, that's a revenue for parks capital projects from grants and again from transfers from other funds to assist with the increase in some of these projects, two projects, Tlawadi's and Log Boom. And therefore the $3.5 million increase in revenues. The other side of that are the expenditures, just like we received, again, the adjustments, just like we received the ARPA funds, American Rescue Plan funds. We now, when those funds were received, council approved an allocation for human services contributions of $1 million, and we're making the adjustment for that amount. We also have for the ARPA fund for operations, $571,000 for 21 and 22 combined. That's for salaries, benefits, supplies, and services. We increased, we're adjusting by an increase of $2.5 million to land acquisition. That's in the Public Works Shop Fund. The original budget reflected $3.5 million, whereas the actual purchase price will be approximately $6 million. We're adjusting that. There's an adjustment for a loan repayment from the Sammamish Bridge Replacement Fund to the General Fund and the REIT Fund in the amounts of $2.3 million and $1.5 million respectively. There's an interfund loan to the Public Works Shop Fund of $2.6 million that is being adjusted and is being reflected in the revised budget. We have interfund transfers, reconciliations, $1.3 million of various interfund transfers, one fund to another one for reconciliation, CIP adjustments, etc. We have the final one, $3.5 million, just like we reflected the revenue coming in. This is the increased CIP park capital projects, Tlawadi's, Log Boom Park. And these adjustments are a combination of, some of them are a combination of changes that we made at the last CIP presentation in June, and then this presentation coming up tonight. The last part of this presentation is the update to the 2021 salary plan. The June CPI for West Seattle, Tacoma, Bellevue, that's the Consumer Price Index for urban wage earners and clerical workers, is the index typically used by the city for any wage adjustments. The increase this year is 6.3%, and it is recommended, we recommend a 6.3% adjustment to salary ranges, adjustments effective January 1st, 2022. If the amendments are acceptable to council, this is a public hearing. And after the public hearing, you'll have the opportunity for an amendment ordinance. And then if the salary plan is acceptable to council, the ordinance will include an amended salary plan for 2022. This concludes the presentation portion of the public hearing, and now we're open for comments and questions.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. In response to the salary that's proposed, I'm inquiring as if there has ever been a gender parity pay gap analysis done for our our Kenmore staff and employees. Given the new changes in Washington state law, newly adopted in 2019, I think it's time to do one. If one has not yet been done, I would hope that we would. And so first, how has a gender parity pay gap analysis been conducted?
I will rely on Mr. Carlinci for the historical.
Yeah, not to my knowledge, but we can have our legal counsel take a look at that and find out what the requirements are, and we can also have it be a part of the DEI process that we're going through as well.
Okay, I would definitely want to look into that and have it followed up if my fellow colleagues also would support that. I don't know. I don't know that this is the time for that discussion, but I'll finish my other question. The other thing is regarding the Strategic Opportunities Fund. Right now we have HR manager / DEI manager, and our work through the DEI is funded through the Strategic Opportunities Fund. But as we grow our work, public transparency there is really important, to be able to track that also for future leaders of Kenmore. And so while we pull from that Strategic Opportunities Fund to fund DEI work, I believe that we need a separate line item that it can be broken down so that it can help support our public leaders in the future and also afford public transparency, in my personal opinion.
The budget, you're correct. The budget under Strategic Opportunities Fund has an allocation of 150,000, 120,000 in 2021 and 30,000 in 2022. Year to date, we have spent about 40,600. The allocation within the Strategic Opportunities Fund is for the development, implementation. It's the development phase, basically, of the DEI process. Once the DEI has been developed, policies in place, procedures in place, and we move forward, at that point in time, it will be transferred back into the general fund. And for that, in the next budget cycle, we can evaluate it as to how much we're going to need, how extensive the program is going to be, and what it will take to fund such a program. So at that point in time, it will be brought back into the general fund, and then an allocation will be determined through the budget process for the next cycle. But at this point in time, as well, we are in the development phase. Our processes involving this DEI plan will have this allocation of 150,000, and year to date we have spent 40,699. That we still have funds there, but of course we will take your recommendation. We'll make a note of it, and in the future we will have a separate allocation for that moving forward.
Thank you. I really appreciate your response on that. And I know that DEI work, once you get into the work of a task force and implementation and community engagement, it can be needing a boost, that budget. And so I want to watch that closely so that we are really following through beyond the words to action. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions before we go to the public hearing? Okay, I would like to declare the public hearing open. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody signed up to participate in the public hearing?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. At this point, I don't see any hands raised. Oh, it looks like we are finally noticing some interest. Here we are. 1 second. If you'd like to speak during the public hearing, this is a good opportunity for you to raise your hand. At this point, I do see Mr. Michaelman.
Mm-hmm.
And In one moment, I'd like to stop the screen sharing so that we can go ahead and put our time on the screen. Mr. Michaelman, one moment. We're going to start our timer and you'll have an opportunity to give testimony. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Can
can.
hear you.
Okay, sorry. It's caught a little bit off guard. A couple things that I want to try to understand here. So what we're doing on the wage, salary wage, I heard that we're comparing ourselves to Seattle and Bellevue. And that's a little concerning because if you look at the dollar amounts of what the average income in Seattle and Bellevue are, it's far from the average of income here in Kenmore. So that's the first thing. And when you're proposing this increase, what you don't understand is, I think it was 6.3, because I can't find my paperwork now, but what you don't understand is there's benefits that are involved. So when health insurance goes up, that's part of their benefit. That's a raise. So when you're looking at someone giving them a salary of X amount of dollars, plus health, plus simple or 401ks, that's part of their whole salary. It's not just their wage. And when you look at the benefits that continually to go up, that should be part of the salary. It is interesting, which is very concerning to me, I think, and I can't remember when it was, we were talking about the 1% tax or something, and we decided not to do it, but we were giving a cost of living raise, which was more than what the extra income. And I think it was the 1% tax, I am not sure. But I remember that the 2% for the staff, the cost of living, was way more than what the tax increase was. Everybody voted against it, you know, the tax increase, and then we're spending more money. It seems like what we're dealing with right now is city government's getting much, much larger and much more costly. And it's on the backs of the citizens of Kenmore. And when we start comparing to Bellevue and to Seattle and to Kirkland and to Bothell, that means you, council, have really lost touch of your community in Kenmore. We can't keep spending and spending. And what gets me, this is what really gets me, our revenues were higher this year than expected. And you're still asking for a tax increase. The issue is we, the people, have elected you. And we've elected you to deal with being very fiscal responsible. This is not being fiscally responsible. When you go ahead and you say a 6.3% raise for clerical, 1 and 1's not equaling 2 because you're not taking into account the benefits that they have. The increase of cost of health insurance, which, by the way, if we want to save some money, we need to raise deductibles, give less percentage to the families for health insurance to our employees, if you really want to save some money. So with that being said, I really want you folks to really think hard about this. When you go ahead and if you decide to do this levy, the tax, you're also doing another thing where you extended the eviction. Well, you think that tax, if people that own residents in Kenmore have the tax increase, they're just going to pass it on to their renters. And the problem is where the people are just borderline still making their payments, that tax increase could stop them from making it if the landlords go ahead, which they probably would, and extend it to the renters. So I urge this council to not vote for a tax increase and do not vote for an increase of wages. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Michaelman.
Is there anybody else who wishes to be heard? Anybody else who wishes to be heard? Anybody else who wishes to be heard on the public hearing related to the budget amendments? Seeing no further hands raised, I'm closing the public hearing. We'll now move on to the business agenda. Ordinance 210540, amending the 2021-2022 biennial budget and salary plan for 2022. Ms. Salcido. You're muted.
Sorry. Moving forward, yes, so we're asking for your approval of the ordinance approving the budget amendments, both the budget amendments as well as the salary plan if acceptable.
Councilmember Shrevenick.
Thanks. Just a quick question. So the budget amendments, according to the agenda, are a separate thing from the 1% tax approval. So point of clarification, does the budget as proposed in item A assume the 1%?
1%?
Does it assume item B or does it not assume item B?
The original budget included a portion, approximately half, a little bit over half of the increase as a result of the 6.3%. The amendment for the salaries increase above that amount that is already in the original budget will be part of a budget amendment in 2022.
It's not what I asked. So the item A is the amended budget. Item B is the 1% property tax levy. Does item A assume that we will be passing item B? Does it include the money that will come from the 1% property tax levy increase?
I'm sorry, does the budget?
Did you budget in the increased revenue from that? Or does it not include that? I'm just trying to, I guess what I'm saying is if we pass item A, have we already, in essence approved item B?
No, it does not
Okay,
include
thank
item
you.
B. Yes, no.
Any other questions, comments? I had two questions I wanted to ask, or two things I want to clarify. So to clarify, the increase, the COLA that we're discussing, the cost of living increase we're discussing, isn't based on like pay for government workers in Seattle or Bellevue, but it's based on increased cost of living in the entire metro area. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's the change over time in prices paid for goods, services, transportation. And this index includes the King County, what was it? Snohomish County, several counties, but one of them is King County, which is where Kenmore is.
So essentially, we're just keeping our employees' buying power flat between the 2 years. Okay. And then, no, that's for the next budget item. That's for the next item. Never mind. Any other questions, comments? Councilmember Marshall.
Thank you. Isn't the CPI increase the greatest increase we've had recently? I haven't kept strict attention to it, but that's just sort of what I assumed with the massive inflation we've had recently. Isn't that the biggest amount we've had? And is there any? Do you think there's any rationale for looking at it somewhat more fiscally conservatively?
Yes, this is a big increase, and it's due to the level of inflation. As you have heard, inflation has been increasing drastically, and so that is reflected in this index. Last year's CPI was 1%, so this is a high, but it's reflective of the times. Yes.
Council, looks like the city manager wanted to add something.
I just wanted to, I looked at the last time we saw something in the 6% range was 2009. Actually, during the height of the last recession, it was about 6%, but it was tied to inflation. And as far as I know, at least as long as I've been here, you've been consistent on tying it to the CPIW for Seattle, Tacoma, Bremerton.
Councilmember O'Kane?
And I just wanted to bring up, in normal times, it would be a 3% increase or so per year for CPI. We didn't have 1% is not very much. This is a catch up year. In addition to inflation, we are basically just keeping our staff salaries flat, as you mentioned, Deputy Mayor. And this is Port of Seattle's the same. It's a 6%, 6.3. So it's necessary for our economy, honestly, in my view. So thank you.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. And I understand that this is a continued rollout of the federal and state cost of a living impact. So that 5.9 rolled up to 6% is what many Americans are going to be receiving. So it's not surprising that we are talking about that same aspect here when we're talking about government. So I understand where we're going here, and these are unusual times. And we were talking about keeping rate of concurrent rate. So I can understand that. I know that it can be confusing to community, but there's a lot of good information to be read about it available to our community as well. So thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. The chair would entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 21-0540, amending the 2021 biennial budget and approving a 6.3% wage increase and a salary plan for 2022.
So moved, Councilmember Shrubnik.
Second, Councilmember O'Kane.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember File.
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler.
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig.
Yes.
The motion passes.
Okay, next item on the agenda is ordinance 21-0538, approving a 1% property tax levy, presented by Finance Administration Director Leticio Salcido.
Thank you. Let me share my screen. Okay, so regarding this presentation, the purpose of tonight's presentation is the approval of the ordinance formalizing the setting of the property tax levy. Just a brief overview. Per our revised Code of Washington, Section 84, the council must hold a public hearing when considering possible increases in revenues. That includes property taxes. It should be done prior to November 30, which is the deadline for filing this with the county, the certification of ad valorem property taxes. After the hearing, council may adopt an ordinance authorizing the property tax increase in dollars and percentages. The public hearing was held last week at the council meeting of November 15, where we presented for review and consideration the regular property tax levy, the excess levy as well with that. With regards to the actual levy, each year council must set the tax levy, and in doing so needs to decide whether or not there will be an increase above the effect of new construction. The tax is limited to the 1% or the lower of 1% or the implicit price deflator, which measures inflation. The implicit price deflator is 3.86. And as explained at the last presentation, let me move my screen. The calculation begins with a 1%. The calculation we started with the prior levy, which was a $5.3 million. To that, we adjusted it, increased it by either the 1% or the 3.86. In this case, the limiting factor was 1%. 1% was the $53,599. We added construction, and the ending 2022 proposed tax levy was $5.4 million, $5,463,405. The $5.4 million translate into a tax rate, a projected tax rate of 0.887, which is calculated based on the proposed levy divided by the preliminary assessed valuation for the city, which is 6.1 billion. Now, the tax effect on a homeowner based on a property valued at $800,000, with this property at I'm sorry, I'm stumbling. So this property of $800,000 taxed at the 2021 rate is of 1.01 would have been assessed $811. If we assume no change, the same property of $800,000 at the new rate of 0.887 would render a tax of $710, which is $101 less than the previous year. Taxed the same property, assuming a 15% increase in value up to $920,000, taxed at the new rate of 0.887 would render a tax of $816, which would be $5 more than previous year. In addition to that, there is the excess levy, the tax levy. The excess tax levy is for the Walkways and Waterways bonds. That's a bond issue of $18.1 million, of which the outstanding balance as of December will be $14.6 million. The resources needed to pay that is $1 million, $1,056,150, which translates into 0.17 per 1,000 of assessed valuation. The property tax distribution for an $800,000 property, including all taxing districts, and one of them being, along with the city of Kenmore tax, the total tax rate per, and this is per the county, would have been 11.27 per 1,000 of assessed valuation. The total bill would have been 9,016, of which only 9% corresponds to the city of Kenmore. And this is the allocation in the various districts: North Shore, schools, fire, Sound Transit, King County, etc. Now there is tax relief per state law. There are two benefit programs, and this is per the county website, for senior citizens and for the disabled. The two programs are the property tax exemption, which is a reduction to the tax due. The second program is a property tax deferral, which is you defer taxes until a property is sold, when it's not a primary residence, and another. The qualifications for the exemption includes an annual household income of $58,000, currently at $58,423. You have to be able to, you own or occupy the property as your principal residence, and over the age of 61 or disabled. So there are tax reliefs for certain individuals. And for information, that's on the county's, King County's website, and this is the phone number. And I just have a chart, a historical chart with regards to the tax rate over time, showing the decline down to the 0.89%. And Next action is the adoption of the ordinance if for your remote review and approval for both the property tax levy as well as the excess property tax levy.
Okay, can we shut down the screen sharing really quickly? Just easier to call on folks if I don't have that up there.
Sure.
If you're finished, of course.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Do we have any questions, comments? Councilmember Shrubnik.
Thanks. I of course, I'm supportive of the excess property tax levy, which we'll get to, but the 1%, I do have kind of mixed feelings about that, and I'm not supportive of passing that. As I didn't support the one last year, I think the rationale for not supporting it this year is even stronger. We have a stronger revenue picture for our general fund, and even if 70%, as you pointed out, of that general fund increase was due to construction that may not be stable, that still leaves us with over, was on the order of 100 to 150,000 more than we anticipated, and the increase from the 1% is only 53,000. So while it is fairly trivial increase for any given property owner, as you pointed out, $5, it is also fairly trivial for us as a revenue stream. And I guess on that basis, and the fact that, many folks are still hurting from the pandemic, I feel like we could forego that. And so that's my position. And I'm also wondering whether you can refresh our memories about how the banked capacity works. If we forego it now, how can we use it in the future if we want to?
You're muted.
Yes, with regards to the bank capacity, we currently have approximately 455,000. So the way it works is it's that you bank the difference between what you could have levied versus what you actually levied. So the difference between that. And so currently it's about 455,000. And based on the initial information from the county, I calculated that without the increase, the bank capacity would be approximately 511,000.
Councilmember O'Kane.
I support the 1%. I think it's important for us to have, I would rather do this now as it's nominal than have more steep increases due to bank capacity in the future. I think it's important too for us to recognize we are in an inflationary period that is the most significant I've felt in my lifetime. And I think it's responsible for us to do this in a measured, low impact way to our community. I'm very comfortable with this tax this year. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? So I just want to clarify one thing, and Ms. Alcido, just correct me if I'm wrong, but what we're voting on right now is an increase of 1% of a homeowner, of 9% of a homeowner's property tax. We're talking about an increase of something along the lines of like 0.09%.
Right.
Is that correct? Okay. I just wanted to put it in context, because I know for a lot of folks, when they hear 1% property tax increase, they may be thinking that we're talking about the entire property tax bill that everybody's paying every 6 months. And I just wanted to be really clear on exactly what we're talking about, which is a 1% increase to 9% of your property tax bill, which is, I'm not even sure if I got the math right, if it's 91 thousandths or 91 millionths, but it's not much. I just wanted to really make sure folks were clear on that. Mr. City Manager.
Yeah, just to kind of illustrate the answer to your question, I always like to look at my house here in Kenmore. I have a 2,200 square foot house, and I think similar houses in Kenmore right now are selling for about $950, but the assessed value on the tax records is more in the $800,000 range. There's always a difference between the assessor amount and the actual market amount. But I paid in 2021, I paid $810 to the city in property tax. My total property tax bill was $7,800. So if my house is the typical house that goes up by about the same assessed value as everybody else's, then I would see a 1% increase. So my property tax bill would go up by about $8, a little over $8. So from $810 to about $818 or $819 in next year.
And one other kind of clarifying question too. I just wanted to make sure this 1% is part of our agreed upon and passed financial sustainability plan that we did last year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, I'm not seeing any more hands. The chair will entertain a motion to approve ordinance 210538, approving a 1% property tax levy.
So moved.
Seconded, Councilmember File.
All right, we have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Seeing no discussion, clerk, please take the roll.
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler,
Yes.
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember File,
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
No.
The motion passes.
Okay, item C, ordinance 210539, setting the 2021 excess property tax levy for the purpose of paying debt service on the Walkways and Waterways Unlimited Tax General Obligation Bonds, presented once again by Finance and Administration Director Leticia Salcido.
Sorry. Basically, this is a continuation. So this is the second part, approval of the property tax levy for the walkways, and actually it's called the excess property tax levy for the purpose of paying the debt service on the Walkways and Waterways bond issue.
Do you have any questions, comments? Okay, I'm not seeing any there. The chair will entertain a motion then to adopt ordinance 210539, setting a 2021 excess property tax levy for the purpose of paying debt service on the Walkways and Waterways Unlimited Tax General Obligation Bonds.
So moved, Councilmember Shrubnik.
I'll second. We've got a motion and a second. Do we have any further discussion? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands up. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Marshall,
Yes.
Councilmember Kugler,
Yes.
Councilmember Shrubnik,
Yes.
Councilmember O'Kane,
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Herbig,
Yes.
Councilmember File.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Salcido. Wait, you're on the next one, aren't you? Sorry.
So I'm gathering my stuff.
Item D, update to the 2021-2026 capital improvement program for park, transportation, surface water management, and city facilities, presented once again by our Finance Administration Director, Leticia Salcido.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me share my screen as let me see. Capital improvement projects. Okay, once again, good evening. So tonight's presentation for review and discussion is the proposed revisions to this capital improvement plan for 2021-2026, followed by the ordinance for approval at the council meeting of December the 6th. But for tonight, we have let me see, our presentation. The capital improvement program for the city for 2021-26 is made up of 33 projects. In total, they equal $100 million. The projects are in 4 categories. We have the park projects with 9 projects valued at 12.9 million. We have 14 projects in transportation, that's 65.5 million. Surface water, 9 projects, 8.2 million. And then city facilities, 1 project and the debt service on a loan valued at $13.2 million. The revenue sources for the $100 million in projects come from various. We have federal grants, state grants, and other, for example, King County grants. In total, grants render 48 million, which is 48% of the total. We have 12% in Walkways, Waterways bond revenue. We have 12% in other debt. That's for the Public Works shop. We have an allocation from impact fees, an allocation from real estate excise tax, 11%. And then we have our local, which would be our Strategic Opportunities Fund, Surface Water Fund, Transportation Benefit District, General Fund, etc. In this CIP amendment, we have 2 revisions, and those are both in parks. We have the Tlawadis Landing Park Waterfront and Mitigation, and then the Log Boom Park. With regards to the Tlawadis, we had a previous allocation of $6.7 million that has now been updated based on current information, new estimates, bid results, to $8.4 million for an increase of 1.7. The revenue sources to cover the increase will be from real estate excise tax, bond proceeds, King County Trail Levy revenue, park impact fees, and grants. With regards to the Log Boom Park, we had a previous allocation of $3.6 million, reduced now to 3.4, and that's basically just a correction. In 2026, we were showing the monitoring for 2026 and future years. So what we did, we just adjusted 2026 to the amount that it should be, so that that is reflected by the 255,000 reduction in that project. With regards to park capital projects, $12.9 million, major projects here. This is a listing of the various projects, but the major projects here are the Tlawadis Landing Waterfront and Open Space at $8.4 million, followed by the Log Boom Park Waterfront Access and Mitigation of $3.4 million. So those are the major projects within the park capital improvement. Now, with regards to the transportation capital improvement projects, as I said before, $65.6 million allocated for transportation. There's no changes here from the June presentation, which was the last revision. Major projects here is the West Sammamish Bridge replacement at $27.7 million. We also have the Juanita Pedestrian and Bicycle Safety Project at $10 million, 68th Avenue Pedestrian and Bicycle Project at $11.9. We have an allocation for sidewalks of $7 million, comprised, I think it's 3-4 projects on this slide, and then pavement preservation, $3.4 million. With regards to surface water capital improvement projects, there's no changes in this category. We have an allocation of $8.2 million, the same allocation, and just worth mentioning are the major projects here, the Fish Passable Culvert at $2.3 million, the Little Swamp Creek relocation at 1.6, and the Blueberry Creek culverts of $1.5 million. The city facility capital improvement program has $13.3 million, and that's for land acquisition and development for the future site of the Public Works shop, $10 million. And then the other major allocation here is $3.1 million for debt repayment for the next 5 years. And that's for the financing for the land acquisition and development. A 6-year view of the capital improvement plan, again, 100 million total here at the bottom. And we have the various categories: parks, transportation, surface water, and city facilities for the next 6 years. Major expenditures to be in 2021 and 2022 at 48 million and 25 million out of the 100 in total. With regards to these are the revenues for the 6 years. And as mentioned before, the majority, a big portion of that is grants, bonds, real estate excise tax, impact fees, etc. This is a pie chart, same information, just the percentages. Again, grants, 48% of the total. Local, impact, REIT, major portions of the allocation for these projects. The CIP projects, the capital improvement plan projects in the total amount of 100 million address as city council priorities. Priorities that the city has set for our community, that the council has set for our community, for our city. Some of the priorities that are being met by the CIP is the implementation of the Walkways and Waterway projects, and the CIP includes 12.2 million, and that's for the Logboom Park, the Tlawadis Landing waterfront, and then safety improvements, pedestrian and bicycle safety improvements, as the Juanita and the 68th Avenue. The CIP continues to implement a parks capital improvement plan. The CIP includes 12.9 million for that endeavor. The CIP continues to focus on transportation safety for pedestrian, bicycle, and other transportation, modes of transportation, allocating 65.6 million for transportation projects. As for example, the pedestrian and bicycle safety improvement, sidewalk program, pavement preservation, bridge replacement, and then signs and lighting, allocation for signs and lighting. Finally, your capital improvement plan addresses your economic development for the city, the goal of advancing public access to water, walkable downtown, and to promote the image of Kenmore. And that concludes my presentation. With regards to the capital improvement plan, there will be an ordinance for your review and approval at the meeting of December the 6th. But in summary, only 2 adjustments at this point in time.
Okay, do we have any questions or comments? I am not seeing any hands up. So I want to thank you very much for the presentation, and we'll look forward to seeing that on the 6th.
Thank you.
Staff report.
Nothing, Your Honor. Have a great Thanksgiving to you and the public.
All right, council member initiatives and comments. I'm just going to go in the order I see people on my screen, so be ready. I might come to you when you're not expecting it. Councilmember Kugler.
I don't have any updates. Just want to thank the staff and all of the council members for the great work we've been doing this year. As the year kind of wraps up, I'd like to sort of just reflect on where we're heading. I appreciate the additional work that the staff is putting in to have meetings in December so we can get everything that we want to accomplish this year. Thank you.
Councilmember Shrubnik.
Sure, and I just want to thank Richard and the consultants, and I should have, of course, done that before I launched into all of my comments on the cap. It was really, it's great work, and I have a tendency to dive right in. So it was great. And to Letitia for some really great, very clear presentations tonight. Really appreciated that. And I do have one thing that I'd like to bring up, and that is the going back to work, so to speak, the going back to in-person meetings. And I'm wondering whether the new year might be the time to do that. I know I haven't kind of talked with other folks about this. I did talk with Rob briefly, but it feels like we could do that. Like we have the methodology for doing that now, and I'd like us to consider that.
Excuse me, council member, are you wanting feedback?
Well, I guess the next step is you need 2 people to discuss it and a majority to bring it as an agenda item.
I'd be willing to discuss it.
Okay, we've got 2 people willing to discuss, so let's discuss. Does anybody have thoughts on in-person council meetings? Councilmember O'Kane, and then Councilmember Marshall and Councilmember File.
Well, I'm ready to go when it's okay for us to come back. So I'm quite open to it. So thank you for bringing it up, Councilmember Shrubnik. And
Councilmember, yeah, sorry.
and Councilmember File for seconding it for discussion. Thank you.
Councilmember Marshall.
Yeah, I think I'd like to go back and in compliance, with whatever guidelines we still have. But yeah, I think it really is time.
Councilmember File.
Thank you. Thank you, council member, for bringing this up. I think it's time for us to start moving towards coming back. I want to make sure that our safety and well-being is of concern, as well as our public. So I hope that there's some room adaptations for us to help keep each other safe and to help our public be safe in the space. But I also have one concern around, staffing. I don't know if all of our staff have themselves or their families have the opportunity to be vaccinated yet. Not that that's any of my business, but I would think that maybe a staff member with very young children might need an accommodation, and I would hope that our city staff can work with them on that, because I'm sure, given how we've been working via the pandemic, that we are adaptable. I certainly do want to see a continuation of Zoom opportunity for our public who otherwise hadn't been able to participate as much as they have been over the pandemic. And this is an equity reducer, and I think it's an opportunity to grow into. So thank you.
Councilmember Kugler.
I agree with what all of the other council members have said thus far. I'm interested in developing a plan with some specifics surrounding, like, will we be wearing masks? Will there be dividers between us? Will attendees be required to have vaccination or proof of vaccination? Like, I'm not saying this is what, I just want specifics like that kind of laid out for us. And I think it's worth a follow-up discussion so that we know what the details are.
And I agree with everything my colleagues here have said. I think getting back in person when it's safe, makes sense. And I especially agree with what Councilmember File said around possibly modifying how the room is set up so that we can maintain some distance from each other. And I would also hope that, we were all willing to, show our Vax cards at least once before we all sit together for hours on end debating exciting things. So yeah, I think a discussion of a future council meeting before the end of the year would make a lot of sense to hash out what that looks like so that we can feel safe, the public can feel safe. Because I think there are some details that need to get worked out before we do that. So I think we have consensus there. Can we add that to a future agenda, Mr. City Manager? All right. Where were we? Oh, and y'all mixed up too when I was calling on people in order. So now I'm kind of lost. Councilmember Marshall.
I can report that the NPRSA met this last week and approved a budget for many needed improvements for the North Shore Senior Center, as well as a renewing and extending an interlocal agreement with the City of Everett for a lot of contracting. So a lot of work is going to be going on at the Senior Center. And I also confirmed that meals are still going to be offered in some form for takeout at the Kenmore branch. Thanks all for a good meeting.
Councilmember File.
Oh, thank you. So earlier I raised the issue of a concern, I hope that we can look into conducting a Kenmore gender parity pay gap analysis to ensure that we are looking at these issues that have been recently been addressed by our state legislature and applying them locally. I think that's a good example of moving forward together as instilling local government action after state action. Other than that, the North Shore School District bond is coming up, and I would hope to have an ask to have a resolution for consideration be brought to us. I would like to see it possibly in December, as it will hit the ballot in February. But first, we have to ask for the possibility of discussion here. To add it to an agenda.
Yeah, I'll second discussion around adding this to an agenda.
Thank you. So this item would require a public comment period for pro and con statement from the community at large, as well as a vote of the council to choose an alignment if they would desire one. And this, I think I can save the conversation for what's in that capital bond for that discussion day. But I would hope that you could support that effort and bring that back to us.
Any discussion? So I'm just looking here and it looks like the election date is the 8th of February.
Yeah.
It looks like ballots will be mailed 19th of January. So I think anytime before then would work as far as getting out our support, or our position, I should say. Is anybody opposed to bringing this to a future council meeting? Okay, I'm not seeing any opposition, so I think we're good to bring this back at a future council meeting. Anything else, Councilmember File?
Yes. I recently reached out to our King County District Courts, and they have a local leaders, newly elected officials orientation. And so they're going to be reaching back out to us. Some of that was put on hold through the pandemic. So those of us who are newer would have an opportunity to join that meeting with the Shoreline District Judge. And they will be responding back with Nancy with dates and times of availability. So other than that, with National League of Cities, I was adopted to the LGBTQ local leaders, local officials board, and voted in by the predominant membership. And I'm really excited to share that new news with you all. It's a lovely opportunity to grow through the work together and bring back a little bit of what we're doing at the National League of Cities and beyond. So thank you. That's it.
Okay, Councilmember O'Kane, I don't think you've gone yet.
I just want to wish everyone a beautiful Thanksgiving with friends, family. I want to thank staff and the public for their participation in our meetings, and really wishing everyone some goodness this weekend and gratitude. So thank you.
All right, and I have one thing that I need to bring up for discussion, and this is something I heard about just last week and is happening relatively quickly. But apparently a few weeks ago, an email was sent to us from the Fire Commission asking, they're wanting to add advisory board positions to the board, so non-voting board members essentially, and they're asking for an elected representative from the city of Kenmore and a representative from the city of Lake Forest Park to, it sounds like, regularly attend their meetings and give input into what the fire district or what the fire commission is doing. I was asked to attend their meeting that they're going to be having tomorrow at 4 o'clock. They're having a special meeting tomorrow at 4. I'm not sure if I have the capacity to regularly attend all of the fire commission meetings myself. So I wanted to toss the opportunity out there, see if anybody had any interest. We don't need to make a decision right now, but and I'll forward around the email that we got from Chairman Webster. But I just wanted to put that out in front of everybody. If anybody has a particular interest in the Fire Commission, this could be an interesting opportunity to interface with them on a more regular basis. I'm hoping to learn a little bit more about this tomorrow at their meeting that I'll be attending. So I just want to put that out there, and we can bring it up at a future meeting if anybody has interest. And if you do have interest, let me know. Because as much as I'd like to do this, I don't think I have the time in the day for it every month, or every couple weeks. So anyway, with that said, we got no further business to come before us. This Kenmore City Council is adjourned.